a juvenile background as a con man, Neal Cassady led a troubled existence that influenced some of the most renowned authors of his time. Neal Cassady was introduced to Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg in 1946 when he went to New York City to visit his old friend Hal Chase at Columbia University. These relationships in particular helped to drive the Beat generation into existence.
One of those guys comes along every once in a while, and that was Neal. He just was the guy. And they all were smart enough and creative enough to realize that. And they never wanted to go out and change the world. They never wanted to be next. They never wanted to start a revolution. They were just artists, and just the men that they were, all coming together at one point. It was amazing.
By leading a rebellious and stimulating existence, Neal Cassady became the inspiration behind some of the most significant beat works, which in turn propelled the beat movement forward. This generation ultimately liberalized what could be published in the United States, and idealized a carefree life full of drugs and sex as the most desired lifestyle of all. This idea of an unself-conscious reality gave the generation something to fantasize about.
Well, there never would have been a Beat generation had it not been for Neal Cassady. I mean, Neal literally is the center point of the Beat generation. He was an influence on Ginsberg, of course. He's the secret hero of Howl.
Yes.
It's dedicated to him. He's, of course, the main character in Kerouac's book, On the Road. He makes the leap into the hippie era by the psychedelic bus, driving further. You know, he was a muse for Kesey as well as for Kerouac. So, frankly, in our museum, what we do is we make the case that Neal was the center of the entire movement. He was the cross-generational bridge between the Beats and the hippies. The 60s, the 50s, and the 60s never would have rolled out the way they had it not been for Neal Cassady.
The novel On the Road by Jack Kerouac, published in 1957, was the first novel to show evidence of Neal Cassady's influence. The dynamic and passionate relationship created when Cassady moved in with Kerouac initiated the cross-country adventure that was later immortalized in the story. Cassady provided the basis for the protagonist, Dean Moriarty, as well as the new style of writing defined as Beat. Kerouac's intention was to capture Cassady's voice in his writing, and therefore used Cassady's syntax in the letters that they exchanged after they parted ways as a platform for his writing. Beat is now defined as a stream of consciousness known as spontaneous prose.
But for these guys, see, and Kerouac, I shouldn't say he wasn't documented. Kerouac documented him really good, I think, in 1948 through 50, whatever, in books like On the Road, which I think is the best. But also, Dharma Bums and Visions of Cody, and they go Big Sur, they go on and on. But what he really captured was Neal's kind of like enthusiasm for life. So Jack really did document him well, I think, and a few paragraphs are just, perfect. I mean, spot on, classic Neal.
Kerouac had recorded their adventures with the intention of incorporating them into a novel, but had trouble finding a place to start. It was only after Kerouac received a series of letters from Cassady that he had the idea to write a book written in the style that Cassady spoke. Only 3 weeks later, Kerouac had written the sensational novel On the Road that successfully captured Cassady's voice.
That Jack changed his style because of Neal's letters and then the music of the time as well. But the major influence was especially the Great Sex Letter, or the letter that part of which has been published. That's what made Jack change his style. Neal's letter.
Jack Kerouac was not the only author who was influenced by Neal Cassady. Allen Ginsberg, another author at the time, promptly embraced his homosexuality upon his first encounter with Cassady, who retaliated by following his hustler's instincts into a sexual relationship with Ginsberg. Ginsberg later went on to write Howl, a controversial poem that is considered a representation of beat poetry. Ginsberg helped Cassady with his literary smarts, while Cassady introduced Ginsberg to a whole new world of drugs, crime, sex, and literature. Cassady worked as a muse for Ginsberg's work, and this showed in Ginsberg's poem Howl when he describes his relationship with Cassady with phrases such as, who bawled in the morning and the evenings in rose gardens in the grass of public parks and cemeteries, scattering their semen freely to whomever come who may. Ginsberg's homosexuality brought forth a new realm of thinking that freed him of his self-consciousness, which led him to write in the new style of beat as displayed in Howl.
He was the catalyst. He was very unhappy. Sad.
And he influenced a lot of other writers, and later Ken Kesey and stuff. But that wasn't his best chapter, I think. What I mean is, I wish he was as well documented in 1948 than he was in 1968, because by then he was really burned out. And, you know, he did too many drugs, and he did like, stuff like, meth, crank, speed, whatever you call it. And he's the last guy that needed any artificial stimulants like speed. I mean, he was already, going all the time. He wasn't always on, but, around that home, he'd be actually, kind of introspective and quiet and stuff a lot of the times. He was always pretty much funny for us kids. He was like a comedian, like a W.C. Fields juggler or something.
"You're either on the bus or off the bus" became the quote of the day in Cassady's next cross-country adventure with budding author Ken Kesey. Tom Wolfe, another renowned beat author, later glorified this journey in his 1968 novel The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. By this time, Kesey had already built up his reputation as an author with his stirring 1962 novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and his latest creation that instigated the cross-country road trip, Sometimes a Great Notion. Kesey organized the road trip from California to New York, where his presence was required for the publication of Sometimes a Great Notion, in the psychedelic painted bus labeled Further. His interest in Cassady's lifestyle stemmed from his knowledge of Cassady's adventures as told in On the Road, which justifies Kesey's invitation to Cassady on his cross-country adventure. During the summer of 1964, Cassady took up the wheel and became the madman in the driver's seat of the bus.
He had this energy and this charm and this way of being that just, in a sense, gathered everybody in, made them feel important, made them feel special, and he basically changed the world in a big way with his own energy and living his own life in his own terms. And it literally took off like a rocket due to Kerouac's works, due to Kesey's works, and it literally shifted the course of our civilization. And that's basically the influence of Neal Cassady. It's, without a doubt, it's there's not even a question in my mind that all this is traced directly back to Neal.
Cassady is revved up like they've never seen him before, with his shirt off, a straw version of a cowboy hat on his head, bouncing up and down on the driver's seat, shifting gears, double-declutch, blamming on the steering wheel and the gear shift box, rapping over the microphone rigged up to his seat like a manic tour guide, describing every car going by.
That's kind of the thumbnail of how he influenced not only, as I say, writers in the writing world, but really the history of the world as far as the counterculture. I'm always telling my mother Carolyn that all this counterculture stuff's all her fault. See, she moved to San Francisco first, and he followed her from Denver, and she turned Jack and Neal onto all these jazz clubs in North Beach and stuff, because she was out, doing her party thing at 22 years old. That's what you do. And so she turned him on, Jack and Neal, to these jazz clubs in North Beach. And so indirectly, it was all her fault, because she turned him on to all this cool stuff. So I'm always teasing her, going, "Yeah, all this is your fault." She goes, "It's not my fault." She goes, counterculture, anti-war, hippies, she goes, "I'm not taking responsibility for all that stuff." And I go, "Sorry, Mom, too late. It's your fault."